So I'm going to try to now move to trust and well-being. It's the beginning of a research, so work in progress, as you will see. So the idea is to find out first, so my method is a bit different from the methods we saw before because of the fact that my scope of study is a bit different, as well as the theoretical background. I care a lot for the semantic context, as you did, and the cultural context. I will try to focus more on the results I found about well-being and trust in the government measure in France and in the UK since the subprime crisis, as the idea is whether this trust has been fading all along. And if we have time, just have a look and compare what happened with trust in the financial system. So as far as the approaches are concerned, due to my scope of research, which is kind of multidisciplinary, I first start with semantics, then a historical approach, 20 years, economic theory, Arrow, Marc Casson and Joel Slamrod, and also some French guys I will mention afterwards. And it is a comparative study using all the statistics, such as the OECD, the ONS, World Value Survey has been mentioned a lot before, Eurobarometer, CEPS in France, and the INSEE. So what was the impact of the financial crisis on trust? French President Nicolas Sarkozy, as soon as September 2008, said in his Toulon speech in September that he wanted that governments had to restore trust and overcome fear. So at the beginning, at least in France, I tried to find out in the UK, I didn't find any speeches mentioning trust, but it was the case in France. And Felix Roth later on wrote this article on the effect of the financial crisis on systemic trust. And Gill Marcus, governor of the South African Reserve Bank, mentioned also the impact of this lack of trust in banks. So if we look at the picture in Europe, we have the Eurobarometer trend, which shows that it did decrease a lot due to the financial crisis. However, I wrote here the impact also of the dot-com bubble and energy crisis. So it looks as if trust, there is an impact of crisis on trust, which can be seen here, even in all Europe. So semantic context, I will not take a long time, because contrary to well-being, trust, in spite of the fact that in English you have trust and confidence, in spite of the fact that it comes from German, it has exactly the same meaning. So for me, it's great because it is easier to compare. Notions are the same. What is different is probably the way it is used. If you look at definitions, it is positive in English, faithful, reliability, legally and trusted. So the word trust, meaning businesses organized to reduce competition, is typically English and has been translated in French as trust. So I put that aside. Now, if we look at French, you will see that the examples given are negative: blind trust, excessive, unjustified, misplaced trust, not worthy of your trust. That was interesting. And also I had a look at distrust and mistrust, and they also have the same meanings. And the question became whether this mistrust, which started with the subprime crisis, was still going on today. So now I move on to the how it is measured by the OECD. And for me, this quotation shows the links between trust and well-being policies. as public trust leads to greater compliance with public policies. And what's the most important probably is climate change. All governments today care for climate change. So if their population do not trust them, I'm afraid these policies will not be successful, and this is an issue. So what is trust according to the OECD? So this definition is recent, 2021. It is a person's belief that another person or institution will act consistently with their expectation of positive behavior. So it is a subjective phenomenon based on interpretations or perceptions. So for me, I still have to go on explaining and showing it more, but it is related to subjective well-being. And again, the OECD has coined these drivers, 5 drivers: responsiveness, liability, openness, integrity, and fairness. So they were made for trust in governments. But what I did was, because I'm thinking about future research, was trying to find out which could apply to finance. So in yellow here, I took out those I will study later on to check trust and understand more drivers of trust in finance. So here they are detailed. This is a very interesting tool for my research. Now let's move to the results. So as you may see here, results, and this is the only ones we have for now, date from 2021. And at that time, France was 28% only people trusting the government, while in the UK, 35% trusted the government. 35% is not so high, however. Yet the UK trusted more. Now, as far as the OECD next survey will only come out in 2024, I try to find other surveys in order to find out about the evolution. So in France, we have this CEPS survey. In light gray, you have the trust in the government. And what you may see is that from the subprime crisis until today, it decreased, definitely, with ups and downs. Ups and downs, I will explain in a minute. So these are recent figures from January 2024. And in January 2024, 28% of French only trust the government. Now, here are the 2 French who had this idea that to show, and I'm certain that in 2007, subprime crisis, it was the case. French society was characterized by distrust, over-regulation, and a fear of the market. So my idea was to check whether this was still the case. So I went on trying to find out statistics, and this comes from the INSEE, and it's really interesting because you can see that, of course, it decreased during the subprime crisis. I know how to use this. Yes. Yes, so here it decreased. Now, very interestingly enough, in 2007, when President Macron was elected, it went up. It went down during the yellow jacket period. And what's really amazing is that during the lockdown, it's not so low. We are all focusing on the lockdown, but as far as trust is concerned, people apparently, it was not as low as the way it was during the subprime crisis, you see. So when people could again go out after the lockdown went up, now, as you may see, war in Ukraine apparently has more impact on trust than anything else today. So just to show that I think it is really important for me to go on in my research and find out about all these impacts, which may probably differ from one country to another. So again, here it is not trust in the government, it is trust in public policy, only 30% in 2024. Now, what about the UK? So these are the ONS statistics, and they show that in 2022, nothing had changed since 2021 for the UK. Now, I found out another survey, which is rather interesting. And this one comes from the world, sorry. Yes, so this one is the WVS survey. So as you can see, it is totally different from the other surveys. We get only 24% of people who trust the government in the UK. And amazingly enough, 31%, sorry, of the people who trust the government in France. So if we have a look at things in 2022, I will try to see how it went on in 2024. Apparently, not only in France do people mistrust the government, but there are other countries in the same trend, and this is rather becoming an issue. So this is again the World Value Survey, and going until 2022. What is interesting is the fact that trust in the government is decreasing, while trust in the European Union after Brexit is increasing. I mean, the results we find with trust are really amazing, but particularly if we compare them to what has been said about well-being. So if we have time, I hope we have, I'm going to be very quickly. So trust is really essential in finance, and it is still the case with digital finance. Now here in light green, you will see that trust in finance kept on increasing slightly, but kept on increasing since the subprime crisis. The situation is not at all the same as trust in the government. So this is in France, where it is now 40%. And in the UK, 35%, if I remember well, trust their banks, and professionals definitely see a steady improvement in recent years. This is not 2008. So since the subprime crisis, many crises have tested public trust in the governments, both in France and in the UK. Distrust in the government seems to be prevalent in the two countries. The decline was even more important in the UK, where trust in the government may have become now lower. It's a question, okay? It has to be confirmed. Mistrust is not specific anymore to the French society, apparently. Rebuilding trust will be pivotal not only to expand state capacity as a long-term project, but also to tackle future crises. So measuring trust using the 5 drivers of the OECD is necessary, because trust is a fundamental element in order to foster well-being policies. Declining public trust in government is worrying. A lot of issues require a high level of trust between citizens and their governments. The threat of climate change is a clear example. Governments must implement the right environmental policies to encourage green transition. However, when comparing trust in finance, the picture is different. Trust in finance has increased since 2008, both in France and in the UK. It is higher in France. The reasons are probably due to the fact that people feel that they are more protected as consumers. And next step of this research will be to update the results to see how trends evolved and try to isolate the drivers of trust, but also of mistrust in the governments of both countries. And another one will be to use the OECD drivers of trust to analyze the financial policies in the UK and in France since the subprime crisis. Thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you. I just have a possible recommendation. So I don't know if you know narrative economics from Schiller, the book and the research. Schiller, you know, and he used this idea of narrative economics in order to show that according to some narrative, in fact, people will behave and trust, in fact, the narrative. He used the example of Roosevelt during the big crisis, and he said that you have just to be afraid of fear. And that could be, in fact, a way to be more positive.
Thank you for a lovely presentation. I'm very interested in trust in the government, but I'm not sure, how do you measure it? What is your instrument to measure it, or your question in a survey? Or so that's actually all that I would like to know.
Shall I answer? Yes, I'm not measuring. As I said, I'm using other statisticians' measures. Yes, I mean, I can further on identify how they measure, but they all have comparative approaches. So what is important for me is that the measure is the same for all countries. I've been doing a survey when I was doing another research before, but first I prefer to have a kind of idea of the context. So first I'm using now what I have, and then if necessary, if I need to get further on, but I'm not sure I will need to have other surveys than that of the OECD. I think that it is really important to isolate how it works, to understand how it works. Because for the moment, again, the OECD started measuring it rather recently. So again, I'm first using what we have, and then I'm not measuring for the moment. Thank you.
Yes, I have a comment on the work you have presented, which are more ideas for a ongoing study, as I understand it. I was struck by one of the tables you showed, where you see that who is the most trusting in government is Chinese and the Russians. So this should be something where you have to think about. And I point you to an excellent book by Pippa Norris. It's called In Praise of Skepticism, Trust But Verify, has been published last year. Excellent, where she uses loads of statistics from all these big surveys like European Social Survey, EVS, etc. And then she compares and tries to understand why. And the explanation is very easy. It's simply we don't have to bother if the trust in governments is too low. Perhaps too low is not good, but too high is bad also, because it means that you don't criticize your government. And she shows us the difference is democratic regime and especially free media. So I think it doesn't make any sense to compare the countries of democratic countries with others if you want to understand trust in government. There is a lot of literature showing, especially based on Eurobarometer, where you can show that effectively with the financial crisis, there was a shift in confidence, all else equal, ceteris paribus. And so it's interesting now to replicate this at a later stage. But I think first we have to put the basic framework right.
Yes, that's why I've been comparing France and the UK. Because first of all, the UK, in the UK, finance is really essential. So if finance is essential, trust is probably very important too. And in France, because of this work we have, whether French people should be less trustful in their government than other people, that's an interesting question. Yes, but the fact that the fact that during COVID-19, people kept on trusting so much. I mean, there is, again, when governments want their policies to succeed, if people don't trust them, in the long term, it is necessary. So maybe one of the reasons why some important policies do not work is this lack of trust. That's my my views. That's